J.D. Vance was never a man who wasted time on useless entertainment. His life was scheduled down to the minute, every meeting mattered, every decision affected the fate of millions of people. The U.S. Vice President was used to intense days full of meetings, political debates, and international negotiations. He did not complain. Such work was his choice, his challenge, and his duty. But even the most resilient people need rest. The last few weeks had been particularly challenging. Vance was flying between states, meeting with governors, dealing with security and economic issues, working on new legislation. He was a man who could take a beating, but his body was starting to give off warning signs: chronic sleep deprivation, constant tension in his shoulders and back, a feeling that even coffee was no longer helping. When his advisor gently suggested that he could use some relaxation, J.D. at first brushed it off. "I have no time to rest," he muttered, filling out paperwork in his office. "Sir, I understand," the assistant replied softly. "But you work at such a pace that even machines fail. And you are not a machine." J.D. looked up at him. "Do you want me to fly to a resort?" "No, but you can start small. Spa salon, massage, sauna. 2 hours of complete disconnection. I assure you, it's worth it." J.D. considered this. He had never been a fan of places like this, but something about the offer sounded tempting. A couple of hours with no calls, no urgent meetings, no emergency briefings. "And do you know a place where I won't be bothered by journalists?" "Of course." The assistant nodded. "This is one of the most closed and elite SPA centers in New York. Complete confidentiality, no press, no random visitors. Only the chosen ones relax here: businessmen, politicians, world stars. No one will dare to disturb you." J.D. sighed, put the documents aside, and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Okay. Sign me up." 2 hours later, he was driving downtown, using his phone to research the spa he was headed to. Indeed, the place looked impressive. The interiors were minimalist, finished with natural stone and wood, and there were panoramic windows overlooking Manhattan. Rare massage techniques, mineral water pools, aromatherapy, cryosaunas, herbal steam rooms, the list of services seemed endless. J.D. stepped out of the car at the entrance to the spa and immediately felt like he was in another world. Everything here was subordinated to an atmosphere of calm, silence, soft lighting, the muffled sounds of water coming from the fountain in the center of the hall. He headed to the reception desk, where he was met by a tall, thin man in a perfectly fitting suit. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you?" "I have a reservation." "J.D. Vance." The man raised an eyebrow slightly, quickly glanced at the screen of the tablet he was holding, then looked back at J.D. "Mr. Vance? I'm sorry, but I'm afraid we have a problem." J.D. frowned slightly. "Problem?" "Yes, sir. The thing is that our SBA center works according to a special concept. We accept only clients who meet high aesthetic standards." J.D. blinked, trying to process what was said. "What do you mean?" "Our clients expect a certain level of fitness." The man paused, as if choosing his words. "Sorry, but our center is visited by people who adhere to strict standards regarding health and appearance." J.D. looked at him intently. "Are you saying that you have an entrance based on the shape of your body?" "In a way," the man replied politely, as if it were the most ordinary request. "Our procedures are aimed at maintaining physical perfection, and to ensure the harmony of the space, we accept only those who meet these standards." J.D. was speechless for a second. "Wait," he finally said. "Are you saying that the spa, a place where people come to relax, now operates on a casting principle?" The concierge kept an impassive expression on his face. "Sorry, sir, but these are our rules." J.D. chuckled and folded his arms across his chest. "You know, I was in the army. I went through grueling training, wore gear in all weathers, slept 3 hours a night, and could run 5 miles without stopping. But now you're telling me I'm not aesthetically pleasing enough for your spa?" "Sir, we are not questioning your fitness," the concierge replied softly. "We are simply adhering to our concept." J.D. stared at him with slight confusion. Do you understand how ridiculous this is? Sorry, sir, but we don't make exceptions. JD could have turned and walked away, but something inside him protested. He had never considered himself a fan of spas, but even he knew that such standards were not just stupid, they were dangerous. They created the illusion that a person needed to look perfect just to relax. He took out his phone. Let's discuss this live on air. The concierge's face changed. Excuse me, sir? JD turned on the recording. Dear friends, how do you like this turn of events? Today I, JD Vance, the Vice President of the United States, cannot get into a SBA center because my body is not athletic enough. Here is a new reality for you. Rest is now only for those who fit into the aesthetic norms. The concierge turned pale. Sir, video recording is prohibited in our center. Oh, really? Well then, I'll just tell the journalists. I think tomorrow the whole country will know about your philosophy. The man swallowed. Let's not jump to conclusions, Mr. Vance. Perhaps we can offer you individual terms. JD put his phone away and smiled. Ah, so that's how it is. So now I'm suitable? Allow me to show you the way, sir. The concierge said quickly, making an inviting gesture. JD chuckled. That's better. He walked inside, realizing that perhaps this incident was not just a funny incident, but another example of how far society had gone in imposing ideal standards. And if even the US Vice President had to prove that he was worthy of just relaxing, then what about ordinary people? JD Vance stepped inside the spa, but his mood was not as relaxed as he had imagined. He had come here to unwind after weeks of political grind, but now the place symbolized something much larger. He saw more than just the luxurious interior, the wealthy clients sipping cocktails by the artificial waterfall, but something more disturbing, a direct representation of how society was turning appearance into a new kind of social hierarchy. The soft light from the lamps reflecting off the marble columns created an atmosphere of serenity, but to JD it all seemed like a pretext for something far more unpleasant. He remembered the concierge at the entrance politely but firmly hinting that his body did not meet the high aesthetic standards of the place. The words still echoed in his head. He could have left and forgotten about the incident, but instead he did the opposite. He decided to stay. He was accompanied by the same concierge, who now seemed more reserved. He led him along a long corridor, behind the walls of which one could hear the relaxing sound of water and the subtle sounds of meditative music. Sorry for the misunderstanding, Mr. Vance, he finally said, turning to JD with a forced smile. We certainly didn't mean to inconvenience you. JD chuckled. You wanted to say that you didn't expect me to make a scene? The concierge tensed slightly, but maintained an outward calm. We're just used to the fact that our clients know our rules in advance. Yeah, your rules are weird. I always thought that a spa is a place where people come to relax, not to show off how low their body fat percentage is. We just create the perfect atmosphere. For whom? For mannequins? The concierge didn't answer. They walked up to the massive doors that led to the central spa area. JD immediately noticed that the crowd here was different from the usual patrons of such places. Everyone, literally everyone, looked like they had stepped off the cover of a fitness magazine. He saw muscular men sipping lemon water, perfectly proportioned women dressed in stylish bathrobes, sitting on comfortable sofas as if they were not relaxing, but taking part in a fashion show. No one looked relaxed. The whole spa center reminded JD not of a place of rest, but of a private club for those who have proved their visual worth. He walked on, and several pairs of eyes immediately turned his way. He was an outsider in this world, a man who didn't fit the unspoken code. He wondered what would happen if someone overweight came in here. Or an older man who didn't have a six-pack but had the money to pay for these procedures? Would they be thrown out? JD chuckled to himself. He had always considered himself a man who looked beyond the surface. But now he realized that even he had underestimated how far society had gone in its obsession with appearance. He sat down on one of the sofas and picked up a menu of treatments. Everything looked expensive and pompous. Detox massage for a perfectly toned body, Cryotherapy for maximum muscle tone, oxygen nutrition session for healthy-looking skin. JD shook his head and handed the menu back to the concierge. Okay, since I'm here, let's start with a massage. Of course, sir. I will ask one of our specialists to prepare the room. The concierge left, and JD sat there, watching the proceedings. The people around him seemed to sense his presence, but tried to pretend they didn't notice him. Everything here screamed that he was different from them. A few minutes later, a young girl in a white uniform approached. She was one of the masseuses, and her smile seemed genuine. Good afternoon, Mr. Vance. Please follow me. JD stood up and followed her down the hallway. Along the way, he noticed more details that made him think. Not a single elderly person. Not a single person with even the slightest flaw in their figure. This wasn't just a spa, it was a club for people who believed that perfect looks made them elite. He walked into the room, where everything was decorated in soft, golden tones. A light scent of lavender filled the air. You can undress and lie down on the massage table, the masseuse said, leaving the room. JD chuckled. He could already sense that this experience was going to be more than just relaxation. He had to understand this world from the inside before he could decide what he would do with it. JD Vance unbuttoned the cuffs of his shirt, rolled up his sleeves, and glanced at the soft massage table covered with a snow-white sheet. Everything around him looked perfect: the light marble floor, the quiet sound of the waterfall behind the partition, the perfectly even light streaming from hidden bulbs in the ceiling. It seemed that every detail in this spa was thought out to the smallest detail to create a feeling of complete perfection. But that was the problem. JD took off his jacket, laid it slowly on the chair, and sighed. Everything here seemed unnaturally perfect, but was there anything real behind it? He remembered the expressions on the faces of the people in the waiting room, the tense smiles, the perfectly toned bodies, the forced indifference to what was happening. They didn't look relaxed. Rather, they had to live up to a standard that had been imposed on them. The masseuse entered the room, her light steps almost inaudible. She was young, professionally polite, with the same perfect appearance as all the employees of this place. Everything is ready, Mr. Vance, she said softly. JD nodded, sat down on the massage table, and slowly began to unbutton his shirt. He wasn't one to be uncomfortable in situations like this, but he felt like he was being assessed. The girl's gaze was reserved, but he caught a hint of professional analysis in it, as if she was automatically assessing his body fat percentage, his muscle tone, his compliance with standards. He chuckled. Are you checking if I meet the criteria of your SPA? The masseuse blinked as if she had been caught doing something and quickly smiled. Oh no, Mr. Vance, of course not. We're here for your comfort. JD lay on his stomach, feeling his muscles numb from the long drives, the meetings, the constant stress. The girl began the massage, her fingers moving confidently and professionally. For the first few minutes, he allowed himself to simply relax, but his mind couldn't completely switch off. He kept thinking about what had happened at the front desk. How they had initially refused to let him in, how far the standards of luxury had gone in this place. Have you been working here long? He asked after a minute of silence. The masseuse slowed her movements a little, then got back to work. About 2 years. And do you like it? She paused briefly before answering. This is a prestigious place. We have a special clientele. JD opened his eyes, looking at the dark wood panel in front of him. Do you mean the rich and famous? Yes, of course, she grinned. Although, in fact, it's not only the rich who come here. Rather, those who look right. JD slowly raised his head and turned onto his side, leaning on his elbow. So if someone is super rich but doesn't look standard, they won't let him in. The masseuse did not expect this question. Well, we have a very strict policy. JD smiled and sat down. Let me guess. Were you also checked before you were hired? She looked away, her lips pressed into a thin line. Yes, but it's part of the image. We have to look perfect to maintain the atmosphere. JD looked at her more closely. There was no indignation in her voice, but there was a sense of weariness in it. She was not just an employee of this SPA, she was also its product. Have you ever considered that this is not normal? He asked quietly. She looked at him again, this time with interest. What exactly? JD chuckled. That you are not assessed as a specialist, but as an element of design? That your clients do not relax either, but simply maintain the illusion of perfection? She bit her lip, then shook her head. I never thought so. But maybe you're right. JD took a deep breath and stood up. I think a massage is enough for me. She looked at him in surprise. But you've only just begun. JD put on his shirt and buttoned it. I came here to relax, but now I see that this place is not about relaxation. It's about status. About conformity. About the fact that you need to fit into the framework, otherwise you simply won't be allowed in. The masseuse remained silent. And you know, I thought it was just about clients, he added, pulling on his jacket. But now I see it's about everyone. She looked down. JD smiled warmly at her. If you ever decide to leave here, let me know. We'll find you a job where you'll be valued for your skills, not your looks. He turned and walked out, leaving behind the first crack in the perfectly constructed facade of the place. JD Vance walked out of the massage room, buttoning his shirt, and headed back into the lobby. This time, he was in no hurry. He wanted to take in the place, to feel its atmosphere, to understand how this strange system of privilege worked, based not just on wealth but on appearance. He passed a lounge area where several customers sat, perfectly fitting the concept of aesthetic perfection. A woman with perfect skin and high cheekbones sipped herbal tea, fingering the pages of a healthy eating magazine. A young man with sculpted muscles and a bronze tan was looking through something on his phone, periodically glancing at his reflection in the mirror opposite. JD felt a few people glance at him, brief, assessing glances. He could guess what they were thinking. He was an outsider here, someone who didn't fit into their perfect world, and that irritated them. He wasn't a Hollywood star, a professional athlete, or a cover model. He walked up to the bar, behind which stood a man of about 40, dressed in an impeccably ironed uniform. How can I help you, sir? He asked politely. JD glanced at the drinks menu. It was all healthy: detox shakes, green smoothies, almond milk, purified water with lime extract. No coffee, no alcohol, not even plain tea. Everything was aimed solely at maintaining the perfect body. Do you have anything ordinary? He asked, grinning. The bartender blinked, clearly confused. Excuse me, sir? Well, I don't know. Cola, for example. Or a chocolate milkshake. The bartender smiled politely, but there was a slight arrogance in his eyes. Sorry. But in our SBA we adhere to the concept of clean eating. And if I ask for steak with fries, will they not serve me either? Someone nearby snorted quietly, but the bartender still tried to keep a neutral expression on his face. We do not offer such dishes, sir. JD nodded as if agreeing with this nonsense, and ordered water with lemon. While he was drinking, someone sat down next to him. He turned his head and saw a man of about 50 in an expensive robe, who was looking at him with a slight smile. His face was toned, but his eyes were tired. Is this your first time here, Mr. Vance? He asked, taking a sip of his smoothie. JD placed the glass on the counter. Yes. And frankly speaking, I think I have the wrong door. The man laughed. I think you're not the only one who thinks so. JD looked at him carefully. Are you a regular customer here? You could say that. The man took another sip and put the glass down. I'm a doctor, a plastic surgeon. My clients are mostly people who come here. JD nodded, beginning to understand where this conversation was going. So you are the one who makes them what they should be, in order to be allowed here? The man chuckled but didn't deny it. I don't force anyone. They come to me themselves because they want to fit in. Correspond to what? Well, this one, the doctor waved his hand around himself. The aesthetic ideal. JD looked back at the people in the room and chuckled. Do you yourself believe in this ideal? The doctor leaned back and thought. Honestly? I used to think so. But now I see that for many, it's not just about improving their appearance. It's about staying in the club of the privileged. They can't afford to get old, they can't afford to gain weight, they can't just relax. JD frowned. Do they live in fear? In a way, yes, the doctor sighed. They're afraid that if they stop meeting the standard, they'll stop being allowed into places like this. They'll stop being invited to private parties, they'll stop being considered in their circles. So they spend tens of thousands of dollars to stay a part of that world. JD shook his head. You know, I'm not against a healthy lifestyle. I understand when people exercise, take care of themselves, want to look better. But when they do it not for themselves, but for someone to approve of them, that's not life. The doctor chuckled. That's exactly why I recognized you. You're a stranger in this world. JD narrowed his eyes. Did you recognize me? Of course. The doctor leaned a little closer. You're J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States. J.D. chuckled. So, am I entitled to special status now? Perhaps. The doctor nodded. But that's not the point. You understand that if you weren't a famous person, you wouldn't have been allowed in here at all. J.D. felt something boiling inside him. So if I were an ordinary person, but looked the same as I do now, they would just turn me away? Exactly. J.D. placed the glass on the bar counter. You know, I was a Marine. I went through hellish training, I know what real strength is. And I'll tell you, no body in this room compares to the strength I've seen in ordinary people just living their lives. The doctor looked at him carefully. And what are you going to do? J.D. smiled. I don't know yet. But if people want to play this show, that's their right. But if they start imposing these rules on others, that's my problem. He turned and walked towards the exit. He had already realized that this spa was not just a place to relax. It was a club for the elite, where appearance mattered more than personality. And he, J.D. Vance, was not going to simply turn a blind eye to that. J.D. Vance walked out of the lounge, his steps steady and confident. He was heading for the exit, but he already knew that this story would not end for him. The air in this spa was filled not only with the aroma of herbal oils and expensive perfume, but also with an atmosphere of vanity, imposed perfection, and fear of inadequacy. This place was more like a closed club, where people were judged not by their intelligence, not by their achievements, but by their body fat percentage and the symmetry of their cheekbones. The concierge who had refused him entry a few hours earlier now stood just inside the door, his head bowed politely, clearly hoping that Vance would simply leave without making a fuss. Was everything all right, Mr. Vance? He asked with a forced smile, as if nothing had happened. J.D. stopped in front of him, put his hands in his pockets, and looked the man in the eye. Do you want an honest answer? The concierge hesitated, but tried to maintain a professional expression. Of course, sir. J.D. nodded, looking around the opulent lobby with its marble columns, glass walls, and perfectly placed furniture. Everything here was flawlessly calibrated, but at the same time it seemed false, like an expensive stage set without a real foundation. This place is pure fiction, he finally said. It creates the illusion that peace, harmony, and health reign here. But in reality it is built on fear. The concierge straightened up but remained silent. You make people believe that they have to fit in, otherwise they won't be here. But you know what you're wrong about. True strength isn't about how perfect a figure is, it's about how confident a person is without all these artificial standards. At that moment, several customers came out of the lobby. A man with sculpted muscles and an expensive robe, a woman with flawless skin and a look that seemed to be trying to pierce J.D. through and through. They did not intervene in the conversation, but listened with curiosity. You're building a cult, J.D. continued. People don't come here for relaxation, they come here for approval. They're afraid that if they don't measure up, they'll be thrown overboard. They're afraid to just be themselves. The concierge kept his smile professional, but the way he swallowed showed that he realized Vance wasn't just complaining. He was making a statement that could very soon become a problem for the place. J.D. chuckled and clapped him on the shoulder. Thanks for the interesting experience. But tell your boss that this SPA is no longer a private space. It is now a public issue. He turned and headed for the exit, feeling the customers' gazes following him with different emotions. Some looked with disdain, some with irritation, and some with interest. As if he had heard something for the first time that touched a nerve. On the street, JD got into his car but didn't drive away right away. He opened his phone and opened the video recording app. "Friends, I want to tell you a story," he began, looking into the camera. He told it all as it happened, about how he was not allowed in because his body did not meet the standards, about how he had to prove that he had the right to just relax. He spoke calmly, without anger, but there was a firmness in his voice. "You know, I'm not against health, sports, taking care of yourself. But when someone starts deciding that only people with perfect bodies have the right to rest, it's not about health anymore. It's about discrimination." The video was uploaded and JD knew that this topic would now be discussed on every news channel. The next day the headlines were, "JD Vance vs. Elite Spa. Why is vacation now only for the ideal? Access to elite SPAs only by figure. New standards of discrimination." The vice president was not allowed into the SBA. He talked about it, and now the whole country is talking about it. Social networks exploded. Some were outraged, others laughed, some even defended the spa, stating that every establishment has the right to set its own rules. But the main thing was that this issue had now become public. A couple of days later, JD received an official invitation from the owners of the SBA. They stated that they had revised their policy and were now ready to accept all clients, regardless of their physical characteristics. JD arrived. Now the concierge looked at him with a nervous smile, and the manager personally led him inside. "I hope you can relax this time, Mr. Vance," he said, trying to sound friendly. JD smiled. "Of course, but first let's check your menu." He opened the list of drinks and immediately found what he was looking for. "Aha! Now you have regular coffee. Great start." The manager gave a strained laugh. JD took a sip and sat back in his chair, watching as the SBA customers looked at him differently now. Now he was not just an outsider. He became a man who made a difference.